The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the briefing room of the USS Hampton, casting harsh shadows across the polished steel table. Commander Rachel Torres had seen plenty of high-stakes meetings in her 15 years of Navy service, but something felt different about this one. The air was thick with tension, and it wasn't just because of the classified operation. They were about to discuss. Admiral James Pierce sat at the head of the table, his steel-gray eyes scanning the assembled officers. With mechanical precision, known throughout the fleet as Ice Pick Pierce, he ran his task force like a Swiss watch. Every person accounted for, every detail cataloged, every face familiar. Which was exactly why his gaze lingered on the woman standing against the far wall. She didn't belong there. That much was obvious. While everyone else wore crisp dress uniforms, she stood in unmarked tactical gear, black cargo pants, boots that had seen real action, and a simple gray shirt that revealed nothing about rank or affiliation. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her eyes never stopped moving, constantly assessing exits, sidelines, potential threats. She looked like she could disappear into shadow at will. "Excuse me," Admiral Pierce said, his voice cutting through the pre-briefing chatter like a blade. "You there, against the wall. State your name and business." The room went dead silent. Every head turned toward her, but she didn't straighten up or show any sign of nervousness. She simply met the Admiral's gaze with calm, steady eyes that seemed to hold secrets deeper than the ocean outside. "I don't have a name that matters to you, sir," she said quietly. Her voice carried an undertone that suggested she'd given orders in life-or-death situations. "And my business is making sure your people come home alive." Admiral Pierce's jaw tightened. In 30 years of military service, no one had ever spoken to him like that. Before he could respond, Commander Jake Morrison, leader of SEAL Team 7, cleared his throat. "Sir, she's with us," Morrison said, his tone respectful but firm. "She's mission critical for tonight's operation." "That's not what I asked, Commander," Pierce replied, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I asked for her name and rank. This is a classified briefing for authorized personnel only." The woman's lips curved into what might have been smile, but there was no humor in it. "My authorization comes from places your clearance doesn't reach, Admiral." The audacity of the statement should have been grounds for immediate removal, possibly arrest. But something stopped Pierce from giving that order. It was the way every single SEAL in the room was looking at her, not with curiosity or confusion, but with unmistakable respect. Even Reverend Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, a broad-shouldered veteran with more combat ribbons than Wall Space, leaned forward slightly. "Sir, with all due respect, she belongs in this room more than any of us. We wouldn't be discussing this mission without her intel." Admiral Pierce felt his control over the situation slipping, and he didn't like it. "Care to explain that, Chief?" Webb glanced at the woman, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "She's been inside the target compound, sir, twice, and she's the reason half the men in this room are still breathing." The statement hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Pierce's mind raced through classified operations, trying to place her face, her voice, anything that would explain why his most elite operators treated her like a legend. But there was nothing. No file, no record, no trace of her existence in any database he had access to. "What's your call sign?" he asked, trying a different approach. "I don't use one," she replied. "Call signs get people killed." Before Pierce could press further, the lights dimmed and the main display screen flickered to life. Satellite imagery filled the wall, a coastal compound in hostile territory, surrounded by high walls and guard towers. This was why they were all here. Inside those walls was a high-value target whose capture could shift the balance of an entire region. "Gentlemen, and whoever you are," Pierce began, shooting another glance at the mystery woman. Operation Nightfall begins at 0200 hours. SEAL Team 7 will infiltrate this compound and extract the target alive. Intelligence suggests minimal security, routine patrol patterns, standard defensive measures. That intelligence is wrong, the woman said flatly. Every eye in the room turned to her. Pierce felt his patience wearing thin. I beg your pardon? She pushed off from the wall and walked to the display, her movements fluid and purposeful. This compound isn't routine anything. It's a fortress designed to kill anyone stupid enough to walk into it. Your standard approach will get every man in this room killed before they make it past the outer wall. Commander Morrison straightened in his seat. How can you be so certain? She turned to face him, and for a moment, something haunted flickered in her eyes, because I helped design the defenses 3 years ago when I was someone else. The room erupted in whispers, but Pierce held up a hand for silence. His mind was reeling. If she was telling the truth, if she had inside knowledge of the target compound, then this mission just became infinitely more complex. You're saying you've been inside? He asked. I'm saying I built the trap you're about to walk into, she replied. The question is whether you're smart enough to listen when I tell you how to avoid it. Admiral Pierce stared at her for a long moment, weighing his options. Every protocol, every regulation, every fiber of his military training told him to have her removed from the briefing room immediately. But the way his SEALs looked at her, the certainty in her voice, the classified operation that hung in the balance, it all pointed to one uncomfortable truth. He needed her. All right, he said finally. You have 5 minutes to explain why my intel is wrong. But understand this, I will be verifying everything you tell us. And if you're lying, if you're compromised, if you're anything other than what you claim to be, I will personally ensure you spend the rest of your life in a very small cell. She nodded once. Fair enough. But Admiral, what? You're going to want to cancel that other operation scheduled for 0400. By the time we're done tonight, you'll have bigger problems to worry about. Pierce felt ice water run through his veins. The 0400 operation was classified, beyond top secret. There was no way she should know about it unless ... double quotes, who the hell are you? He whispered. She smiled then, a real smile this time, but it was the smile of a predator who just realized she was hunting rather than being hunted. I'm the reason your boys come home, Admiral. The question is whether you're going to let me do my job, or whether you're going to let your pride get them all killed. As the briefing continued, one thing became crystal clear to everyone in the room. Whatever was about to happen in that compound, it was going to be unlike anything they'd ever experienced. And the woman without a name was either their greatest asset or their most dangerous enemy. Admiral Pierce just hoped he could figure out which before it was too late. The briefing room felt smaller somehow, as if the walls had moved closer together, while Admiral Pierce processed what he'd just heard. The woman, still nameless, still unauthorized, had just revealed knowledge of classified operations that barely a dozen people in the entire military should possess. His first instinct was to call security, have her detained, interrogated, processed through channels until someone, somewhere, could explain who she was. But the SEALs were still looking at her with that same unwavering respect, and that stopped him cold. Show me, he said finally, his voice tight with controlled tension. Show me what's wrong with our intelligence. She moved to the display controls with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. Her fingers danced across the interface, zooming in on specific sections of the compound, highlighting features that the original intelligence had missed or misidentified. Your satellite photos are 18 months old, she began, her voice taking on a clinical tone that somehow made her words more chilling. This guard tower here, it's been reinforced and equipped with thermal imaging. These decorative lights around the perimeter? They're motion sensors linked to a central alarm system. And this area marked as courtyard on your maps. She highlighted a section that looked innocuous enough, an open space between buildings. It's a kill zone, overlapping fields of fire from 3 concealed positions. The moment your team sets foot in there, they're dead. Commander Morrison leaned forward, studying the display. How do you know all this? Because I watched them build. She replied. I was there when they tested the sightlines, when they calibrated the sensors, when they ran the first live fire exercise to make sure the crossfire pattern was perfect. The room was silent, except for the hum of ventilation and the distant sound of waves against the ship's hull. Admiral Pierce felt his worldview tilting on its axis. In 3 decades of military service, he'd never encountered anyone quite like this woman. You were embedded with the enemy? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. I was embedded with reality, she corrected. Sometimes the lines aren't as clear as we'd like them to be. Chief Webb spoke up from his position at the table. Sir, I was at Kandahar when the intelligence went bad on Operation Silent Thunder. 12 good men walked into what should have been a routine extraction. Only 3 came out. Pierce remembered Silent Thunder. It had been a disaster of epic proportions, the kind of operation that ended careers and led to congressional hearings. She was our overwatch that night, Webb continued. 800 meters out, 1 rifle, no backup. She kept us alive long enough for extraction to arrive. I don't remember any overwatch on Silent Thunder, Pierce said slowly. You wouldn't, the woman replied. Overwatch wasn't supposed to exist. Just like tonight, I'm not supposed to be here. Admiral Pierce felt the familiar weight of command decisions pressing down on him. Every instinct told him to follow protocol, to stick to the approved plan, to maintain the chain of command that had served him so well throughout his career. But those same instincts were being challenged by something he'd rarely encountered in his years of service. The absolute certainty of people he trusted. Let's say I believe you, he said carefully. Let's say our intelligence is compromised and your information is accurate. What are you proposing? She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. I'm proposing we stop playing by their rules and start playing by mine. Her fingers moved across the display again, tracing new routes, marking different entry points, highlighting areas that hadn't appeared in the original briefing materials. The compound has a weakness, she said. The builders were smart, but they were also arrogant. They assumed any attack would come from the obvious angles, the main gates, the vehicle approaches, the helicopter landing zones. They didn't account for someone who thinks like they do. And you think like they do? Morrison asked. I think like someone who spent 3 years figuring out how to kill the people who trained me, she replied matter-of-factly. The casual way she said it sent a chill through the room. This wasn't bravado or posturing. This was a simple statement of fact delivered by someone who had clearly crossed lines that most people couldn't even see. Admiral Pierce found himself facing a decision that would define the rest of his career. Trust the official intelligence, follow the approved plan, and potentially send his best people into a death trap. Or trust this woman, this ghost who appeared from nowhere with knowledge that shouldn't exist, and the respect of warriors who'd seen hell firsthand. Commander Morrison, he said finally, your assessment. Morrison didn't hesitate. Sir, I've worked with her before. Not officially. Not in any way that appears in reports. But when the mission went sideways in Caracas, when our extraction failed. In Mumbai, when the intel was wrong in Damascus, she was there. She got us out. How many operations are we talking about? Pierce asked. Over the past 5 years? Maybe 20, maybe 30. Hard to say exactly. Sometimes you don't know she's there until you need her. Sometimes you never know she was there. At all. Admiral Pierce looked around the room at his most trusted officers, at the SEALs who'd served under him through some of the military's most challenging operations. They were all looking at him with the same expression, trust her. But there was one more question that needed answering. What do you want in return? He asked her directly. She met his gaze steadily. I want your people to come home alive. That's it. That's all I've ever wanted. And after tonight? After tonight, I disappear again. You go back to your regular briefings with your regular intelligence and your regular operations. Tonight never happened. I was never here, and you never. Learn my name because I never told you what it was. Pierce felt something shift in his chest, some long-held belief about how the military worked, about chains of command and proper procedures, and the importance of following regulations. This woman was offering to save his people's lives and asking for nothing in return except the privilege of remaining invisible. All right, he said finally. Show us your plan. But understand this, if anything goes wrong, if this is some kind of elaborate setup, if my people get hurt because I listen to someone who doesn't officially exist, I will find you. I will hunt you down, and I will make sure you face every consequence the law allows. She nodded once, accepting the terms without argument. Fair enough, Admiral. But you should know, I've been hunted by better people than you, and they're all either dead or working with me now. And she began outlining her alternative approach to the mission. Admiral Pierce realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in his military career. He was watching a ghost become real, watching the invisible become visible, watching someone step out of the shadows specifically to keep others from dying in them. And despite every regulation, every protocol, every principle of command he'd built his career on, he found himself grateful that she had. The revised mission briefing lasted 3 hours. By the end, Admiral Pierce's carefully ordered world had been turned completely upside down. Every assumption about the target compound, every piece of intelligence they'd relied on, every tactical decision in the original plan, all of it was wrong. Not just incomplete or outdated, but fundamentally, dangerously wrong. The woman, who still refused to provide her name, had dissected their operation with surgical precision, exposing flaws that could have gotten everyone killed. But more than that, she'd revealed something that made Pierce's blood run cold. Someone had deliberately fed them bad intelligence. The leak isn't in your chain of command, she explained, manipulating the display to show communication patterns. And information flow? It's higher up. Someone with access to operational planning, someone who knows your procedures, someone who wanted this mission to fail. Commander Morrison frowned. You're saying this is an inside job? I'm saying someone very powerful wanted SEAL Team 7 to walk into a trap, she replied. The question is whether they wanted you captured or killed. Admiral Pierce felt his jaw clench. The implications were staggering. If she was right, if there really was a high-level leak, then every operation he'd planned, every mission he'd authorized, every decision he'd made could have been compromised. How do you know all this? He asked. She looked at him for a long moment before answering. Because 3 days ago, I was offered a substantial sum of money to ensure this mission failed. When I declined, they tried to have me killed. That's when I decided it might be time to pick a side. The room went silent. Chief Webb was the first to speak. Who made the offer? People who don't officially exist, working for organizations that have no names, funded by budgets that appear in no accounting records, she said. The same kind of people I used to work for. Admiral Pierce felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. Everything he'd built his career on, clear chains of command, defined objectives, identifiable enemies, was dissolving into shadows and uncertainty. What are you asking me to do? He said finally. I'm asking you to trust your instincts instead of your orders, she replied. I'm asking you to save your people, instead of following a plan designed to kill them. And I'm asking you to accept that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones wearing the same uniform you are. Before Pierce could respond, his communications officer approached the table. Admiral, priority message from CENTCOM, eyes only, sir. Pierce took the tablet and read quickly. His expression darkened with each line. What is it, sir? Morrison asked. Pierce set down the tablet with deliberate care. CENTCOM is moving up the timeline. They want us to launch the operation immediately. No delay, no additional reconnaissance, no questions asked. The woman's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. Interesting timing. You think this is connected? Pierce asked. I think someone just showed their hand, she replied. They know I'm here. They know their original plan is compromised. So now they're trying to rush you into the trap before you have time to think. Admiral Pierce stood up and began pacing, a habit he developed during the most stressful moments of his command. Every option he could see led to disaster. Follow CENTCOM's orders and send his people into a death trap. Refuse the orders and face court-martial. Trust a woman he'd known for less than 4 hours and potentially compromise national security. Sir, Commander Morrison said quietly, what are your orders? Pierce stopped pacing and looked around the room. These were good people, dedicated, professionals who'd followed him into some of the military's most dangerous operations. They deserved better than to be sacrificed on the altar of someone else's treachery. Chief Webb, he said finally. Yes, sir? How many operations has this woman guided you through? Webb thought for a moment. Directly? Maybe 8 or 10. Indirectly? Impossible to say. Sometimes you don't know she's there until you really need her. And in all those operations, how many people have you lost when she was providing intelligence? None. Sir, 0 casualties when she's running Overwatch. Pierce nodded slowly. The mathematics were simple enough. Follow official orders and lose his entire team. Trust the ghost and maybe, just maybe, everyone comes home. Commander Morrison, he said, turning to the SEAL team leader. I'm about to give you an order that could end both our careers. Are you prepared for that? Morrison didn't hesitate. Sir, my job is to bring my people home alive, whatever it takes. Good. Pierce moved to the communications console and began typing. I'm sending a message to CENTCOM, informing them that we've encountered unexpected weather conditions and need to delay the operation for 6 hours. Sir, his communications officer interjected. CENTCOM specifically said no delays. Then they'll have to be disappointed, Pierce replied coldly, because I'm not sending good people to die for bad intelligence. He finished the message and sent it, then turned back to the woman who had upended his entire worldview in a single evening. You have 6 hours to prove that your plan works, he told her. But I need something from you first. Name it. I need to know who you really are. Not your name, not your background, not your service record. I need to know what you're fighting for. Because if I'm going to risk everything on your word, I need to understand what drives you. She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes focused on something beyond the walls of the briefing room. 5 years ago, she said finally, I led a team into a compound very much like this one. The intelligence was perfect, the plan was flawless, the execution was textbook, and it was all a setup. 6 good people died that night because I trusted the wrong information from the wrong sources. Her voice remained steady, but Pierce could hear the weight of loss beneath her words. I made a promise standing over their graves. I swore that I would never again let politics or bureaucracy or someone else's agenda get good people killed. That's what I'm fighting for, Admiral. That's what I've been fighting for ever since. Admiral Pierce studied her face, looking for any sign of deception, any hint that this was all an elaborate ruse. But all he saw was the quiet determination of someone who'd found their purpose in the worst possible way. All right, he said. 6 hours. Show me how to bring my people home. As the revised planning session began, Pierce realized he'd just crossed a line that he could never uncross. He'd chosen to trust someone who existed outside every system he'd ever known. Someone whose loyalty belonged to principles rather than institutions. It was either the smartest decision of his career, or the one that would destroy everything he'd worked for. But looking at the faces of his SEALs, faces filled with confidence for the first time since the original briefing began, he knew he'd made the right choice. Now he just had to hope. It was enough. Admiral Pierce barely had time to process the implications of his decision before the first crisis hit. His communications officer burst into the briefing room, face pale with concern. "Sir, we've got a problem. CENTCOM is demanding immediate confirmation of mission status. They're not accepting the weather delay." Pierce felt his stomach tighten. What exactly are they saying? Direct quote, "Sir, weather conditions are acceptable. Launch immediately or explain why Admiral Pierce is refusing direct orders from the fighters." From the Joint Chiefs. The woman looked up from the tactical display where she'd been marking new entry routes. "How long since you sent the delay message?" 47 minutes, Pierce replied. "Then they know." Her voice carried a certainty that made everyone in the room go still. No one responds that fast to routine operational adjustments. They're monitoring this operation in real time. Commander Morrison leaned forward. "You think they know she's here?" "I think they know their original plan is compromised," she replied. "The question is how far they're willing to go to salvage it." As if summoned by her words, Admiral Pierce's secure satellite phone buzzed. The caller ID showed a number he recognized, direct line to the Pentagon. He looked at the phone for a long moment before answering. "Admiral Pierce." "James, this is General Harrison." The voice on the other end was crisp, authoritative, and carried the weight of 3 decades in command. "I understand you're having some concerns about the operation timeline." Pierce felt sweat bead on his forehead. General Harrison was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and not someone who typically involved himself in tactical operations. "Sir, we've identified some potential complications with the original intelligence. I thought it prudent to—" "James," Harrison interrupted, "I need you to understand something. This operation has implications far beyond your mission parameters. There are political considerations, diplomatic ramifications, and strategic objectives that require immediate action. The delay is not acceptable." Pierce looked across the room at the woman, who was watching him with sharp, calculating eyes. She held up her hand, fingers spread, then closed it into a fist. 5 minutes. She was asking him to stall for 5 minutes. "General, with respect, I have serious concerns about the intelligence package. If my information is correct, your information is irrelevant," Harrison cut him off. "You have your orders, Admiral. Launch the operation immediately, or I'll find someone who will." The line went dead. Pierce set down the phone and looked around the room. Every face was turned toward him, waiting for his decision. In 30 years of military service, he'd never directly disobeyed an order from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. But he'd also never had the lives of his people hanging in the balance quite like this. "Chief Webb," he said finally. "Yes, sir?" "How long would you estimate it would take someone to replace me as task force commander and launch this operation?" Webb considered the question seriously. "Minimum 4 hours to fly in a replacement, brief them on operational parameters, and coordinate with the SEAL team. More likely 6 to 8 hours if they want to do it right." The woman spoke up from her position at the display. "They won't wait that long. Too many variables, too many chances for word to spread about what's really happening here." "Then what do you expect them to do?" Morrison asked. She turned to face Admiral Pierce directly. They're going to try to eliminate the problem, starting with me, then moving on to anyone who might have been compromised by contact with me. The words hung in the air like a chemical cloud. Pierce felt his blood go cold. Are you saying they target military personnel? I'm saying that when organizations like this feel cornered, they don't distinguish between military personnel and acceptable losses, she replied. Everyone in this room is now a security risk simply by virtue of being here. Before anyone could respond, the lights in the briefing room flickered and went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Then the ship's general alarm began to sound. General quarters, all hands. To battle stations. This is not a drill. Pierce grabbed his communications handset. Bridge, this is the Admiral. What's our status? Sir, we've got multiple surface contacts approaching at high speed. No response to radio hails, no identification signals. Estimated time to weapons. Range, 12 minutes. The woman was already moving, checking her equipment with the quick, efficient motions of someone who'd been in similar situations before. They're not going to sink the ship, she said over the alarm. Too many witnesses. Too much attention. But they'll board under some pretext. Inspection, security sweep, emergency response. Once they're aboard. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood. Commander Morrison stood up. What do you recommend? We go now, she said. Right now, while they're focused on the ship. Launch the mission before they can stop us. Admiral Pierce felt the weight of command pressing down on him like a physical force. Every decision point in his career had led to this moment, where he had to choose between following orders that would get his people killed, or trusting someone who officially didn't exist. Chief Webb, get the team ready for immediate deployment, he ordered. Full combat load, alternative insertion plan. Sir, his communications officer protested. You don't have authorization. I have all the authorization I need, Pierce. Cut him off. My people are in danger, and I'm going to protect them. Anyone who has a problem with that can file a complaint with whoever's left standing when this is over. The woman approached him as the team prepared for departure. Admiral, once you launch this mission, there's no going back. They'll come after you with everything they have. Pierce looked at her steadily. Will my people come home alive? If you trust me, yes. Then that's all I need to know. As SEAL Team 7 prepared for emergency deployment, Admiral Pierce realized he was no longer fighting just for the success of a single mission. He was fighting for the principle that sometimes doing the right thing mattered more than following orders, even when those orders came from the highest levels of command. The hunter had become the hunted, but he'd chosen his side. Now he just had to hope it was the winning one. The insertion boats cut through dark water under a moonless sky, their engines muffled to whisper quiet. Admiral Pierce watched from the bridge of the USS Hampton as the two small craft disappeared into the darkness, carrying SEAL Team 7 toward a target that had already cost too much and claimed too many lives. But his immediate concerns were closer to home. The approaching surface vessels were now visible on radar, 3 high-speed patrol boats in a formation that suggested military precision. They weren't pirates or smugglers. They were professionals, and they were coming for his ship. Admiral, his communications officer called out. Incoming transmission on emergency frequency. They're demanding permission to board for a routine security inspection. Pierce almost laughed at the absurdity. There was nothing routine about 3 military vessels appearing in international waters at 2 a.m. demanding access to a classified operation. Tell them we're conducting training exercises and cannot accommodate boarders at this time, he ordered. Sir, they're not taking no for an answer. They're citing maritime security protocols and saying they have authority to board regardless of our response. Through his binoculars, Pierce could see the approaching boats more clearly now. Fast, modern craft with mounted weapons and what looked like tactical teams preparing for boarding operations. Whoever was behind this had serious resources and wasn't afraid to use them. Meanwhile, 30 miles away, SEAL Team 7 was approaching their target under cover of absolute darkness. The woman Pierce still didn't know her name, and was beginning to suspect he never would, had guided them to an insertion point that didn't appear on any satellite image or intelligence report. A narrow channel between two rock formations that would bring them directly to the compound's weakest point. Commander, Morrison's voice crackled over the encrypted communication system. Overwatch, we're at the insertion point. Confirm tactical situation. A response came immediately, calm and professional. 3 patrol boats circling the primary perimeter. Guard rotation changed from the intelligence package. They're running random patterns now instead of scheduled sweeps. Someone definitely knows we're coming. Pierce felt his jaw clench. Even with all their precautions, all their operational security, the mission was still compromised. But it was too late to abort now. The team was committed, and the approaching patrol boats meant there was no safe harbor to retreat to. "Can you get them inside?" he asked into his own headset. "Working on it," came her reply. "Stand by." On the dark water near the compound, she was doing something that would have been impossible for anyone else. Using knowledge gained from years of operating in the shadows, she was turning the enemy's own security measures against them. The patrol boats that were meant to protect the compound were running in predictable patterns, despite the random timing. And predictable patterns, no matter how complex, could be exploited by someone who understood the underlying logic. Team 7, listen carefully, her voice came over the comm. In 47 seconds, Patrol Boat Alpha will cross behind the south jetty. You'll have a 90-second window to make the channel. Do not deviate from the route I'm transmitting. The underwater sensors are motion activated, but they have a blind spot exactly where you'll be swimming. Morrison's team moved with the precision of a Swiss watch. They'd worked with her before, and they trusted her timing absolutely. As the patrol boat disappeared behind the jetty, 8 figures slipped over the side of their insertion craft and into the black water. Back on the USS Hampton, Admiral Pierce was facing his own crisis. The patrol boats had closed to within boarding range, and their leader was transmitting increasingly aggressive demands. USS Hampton, this is Commander Blake of Joint Maritime Security Task Force. You will prepare to receive boarders immediately, or we will consider you a hostile vessel. Pierce knew there was no such thing as a Joint Maritime Security Task Force. This was a black operation, conducted by people who thought they could rewrite the rules whenever it suited their purposes. "Bridge, all stop," he ordered. "Prepare to repel boarders." His crew looked at him with a mixture of shock and admiration. Pierce was essentially declaring war on unknown forces with superior firepower and legal authority that might or might not be legitimate. But he'd made his choice, and he was going to stand by it. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "they're launching boarding craft. 2 boats, approximately 12 personnel each." "Understood. Seal all compartments. Security teams to repelling positions." Meanwhile, SEAL Team 7 had made it through the underwater approach and was now scaling the compound walls. The woman's intelligence had been perfect. The blind spots in the sensor coverage, the timing of the patrols, even the structural weaknesses in the seemingly impregnable walls. "We're inside," Morrison reported. "Proceeding to primary target. No contact so far." "Negative on no contact," she replied. "Immediately. You've got 2 guards moving toward your position from the east. They're not on patrol. Someone sent them to investigate. 30 seconds until visual contact." Morrison's team reacted instantly, melting into the shadows with the practiced ease of professionals. The guards passed within feet of their position, without detecting anything unusual, but the message was clear. Their presence was known, even if their exact location wasn't. "This is turning into a running gun battle," Chief Webb whispered into his comm. "Then we'd better run faster than they can shoot," came the woman's reply. On the USS Hampton, the boarding craft had reached the ship's hull. Admiral Pierce watched through night vision equipment as tactical teams prepared to scale the sides of his vessel. These weren't regular military personnel. Their equipment was too advanced, their movements too coordinated, their willingness to board a U.S. Navy vessel too casual. "Admiral," his communications officer said urgently. "Priority flash message from CENTCOM. They're ordering immediate stand-down and full cooperation with the boarding teams." Pierce looked at the message briefly, then deleted it. "Communications are experiencing technical difficulties," he announced to his bridge crew. "We seem to be having trouble receiving transmissions." Several of his officers smiled grimly. They understood what was happening, even if they couldn't officially acknowledge it. The first boarding hooks clanged against the ship's rail, followed immediately by flashbang grenades designed to disorient the crew. But Pierce's people were ready with protective equipment and tactical positions that turned the raiders' own weapons against them. "Repel boarders," Pierce commanded, and his crew responded with the disciplined fury of sailors protecting their ship. Miles away, SEAL Team 7 was fighting their own battle. The compound's defenders had abandoned all pretense of routine security and were actively hunting for the infiltrators. But they were hunting for a team that was supposed to enter through the main approach, not for ghosts who'd materialized inside their supposedly secure perimeter. "Target building in sight," Morrison reported. "But we've got a problem. The HVT isn't where intelligence said he'd be." "Because he was never there," the woman's voice replied. "The whole thing was a setup from the beginning. But I know where he really is." "Where?" "Underground bunker, 50 meters northeast of your current position. And he's not alone. He's got company that's going to make extraction very interesting." As both battles intensified, Admiral Pierce realized that win or lose, nothing would ever be the same again. He'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, made enemies that couldn't be appeased, and committed himself to a course of action that would either vindicate everything he believed in or destroy everything he'd worked for. But as he watched his crew fight with the mendigate determination of people defending their home, and as he listened to his SEALs adapt and overcome impossible odds with the guidance of someone who existed outside every system he'd ever known, Pierce felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt like he was finally fighting for the right side. The underground bunker was everything the woman had said it would be. A reinforced concrete maze designed to withstand direct bombing and conceal the most valuable assets. But what Commander Morrison and his team found inside was far worse than they'd expected. The high-value target was there, exactly where she'd said he would be. But he wasn't a prisoner or a fugitive hiding from justice. He was sitting at a conference table with 3 men in expensive suits, calmly reviewing documents while American soldiers died in the compound above. "Command, we have eyes on the HVT," Morrison reported through his encrypted comm. "But we've got a problem. He's not alone, and this doesn't look like a capture scenario." The woman's voice came back immediately, tinged with something that might have been satisfaction. "Describe what you're seeing." 3 additional personnel, civilian clothes, briefcases, electronic equipment. "Looks like they're conducting business. Check the documents on the table carefully." Chief Webb moved to a position where he could observe through the bunker's reinforced glass window. What he saw made his blood run cold. "Command, I'm seeing what appears to be operational planning documents. Use military insignia on the headers. Troop movement schedules, equipment manifests, personnel files. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Morrison's voice cut through the calm with deadly precision. Are you telling me we're looking at classified U.S. military intelligence being sold to enemy operatives? I'm telling you that you're looking at the reason this mission was supposed to fail, the woman replied. The HVT isn't the target, he's the buyer. And those documents he's purchasing include the complete operational plans for tonight's mission, including the names and addresses of every family member of every SEAL on your team. Morrison felt his world tilt on its axis. This wasn't a capture mission or a counter-terrorism operation. This was damage control. Someone in the highest levels of the military was selling intelligence to enemy operatives, and SEAL Team 7 had been sent in as disposable assets to eliminate the evidence. New mission parameters, Morrison announced to his team. We're taking everyone in that room alive. I want answers, and I want them breathing. Meanwhile, aboard the USS Hampton, Admiral Pierce was learning the same terrible truth from a different angle. The boarding teams that had attempted to take his ship weren't foreign operatives or rogue military units. They were American Special Forces, operating under orders that came from the same Pentagon officials who tried to force the original mission timeline. His communications officer approached with a tablet, showing decoded messages intercepted from the boarding craft. Sir, you need to see this. Recrack their communication encryption. Pierce read the messages with growing horror. Orders to secure all personnel who'd been exposed to unauthorized intelligence sources. Directions to confiscate all records related to the evening's briefings. Instructions to detain anyone who'd had contact with the unidentified asset for indefinite interrogation. They're not here to board us, he realized aloud. They're here to disappear us. Sir, his tactical officer reported, the boarding teams are regrouping for another assault. But we're detecting additional signals. Looks like air support, inbound. Pierce looked at his bridge crew, men and women who'd served with him for years, who'd followed his orders without question, even when those orders meant defying the highest levels of command. They deserved to know what they were fighting for. Listen to me, all of you, he announced over the ship's internal communication system. What we've uncovered tonight is bigger than one compromised mission. There are people in our own government who were willing to sacrifice American lives to protect their illegal activities. They've sent U.S. forces to silence us because we discovered their operation. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. I'm giving every one of you a choice. Anyone who wants to can stand down right now, claim they were following orders, and try to distance themselves from what's about to happen. But if you stay, if you continue to fight with me, understand that we're not just defending this ship. We're defending the principle that some things are more important than following orders. Not a single person moved. Not one member of his crew stepped away from their position. Back in the compound, SEAL Team 7 was preparing for the most important capture operation of their careers. The underground bunker had multiple access points, but all of them were designed to funnel attackers into killing zones. Except for one. There's a maintenance tunnel that connects to the bunker's air filtration system. The woman's voice guided them. It's too small for normal assault teams, but it'll get 2 people inside undetected. Morrison looked at his options. The tunnel approach would work, but it meant splitting his team in an extremely dangerous environment. I'll take the tunnel, Chief Webb volunteered. Need someone small enough to fit and experienced enough to handle whatever's waiting on the other side. Take Rodriguez with you, Morrison decided. Rest of us will create a distraction at the main entrance. When you hear the fireworks, you move. As Webb and Rodriguez crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnel, breathing recycled air and fighting claustrophobia, they could hear voices from the bunker below. The conversation was being conducted in English, and what they heard made their mission even more urgent. The SEAL team should be dead by now, one of the voices was saying. The compound defenses were specifically designed to eliminate them once they entered the kill zone. What about the ship? Another voice asked. The Hampton will be secured. Within the hour. All personnel will be detained for debriefing, and any evidence of tonight's operation will be sanitized. And the woman? The woman is a problem that will be dealt with permanently. She knows too much, and she's already proven she can't be bought or controlled. Webb felt his jaw clench. He'd served with the woman on multiple operations, had seen her risk her life to save American personnel more times than he could count. The idea that his own government wanted her dead made him sick to his stomach. We're in position, he whispered into his comm. Ready to move on your signal. Morrison's voice came back steady and determined. Remember, we need them alive. These people have answers, and dead men don't talk. The assault began with explosive charges that blew open the bunker's main entrance, filling the air with smoke and debris. In the confusion that followed, Webb and Rodriguez dropped through the ventilation system directly into the conference room. The three men, in suits, barely had time to reach for their weapons before they found themselves staring down the barrels of suppressed rifles held by very angry Navy SEALs. Nobody moves, nobody dies, Webb announced calmly. But if anyone so much as breathes wrong, we're going to have a conversation about patriotism that you won't enjoy. The HVT, a thin man with expensive clothes and cheaper morals, looked around the room with the calculating expression of someone trying to determine his options. You have no idea what you're interfering with, he said in accented English. This operation has approval at the highest levels of your government. Then those levels are about to get a lot lower, Morrison replied as he entered through the blown entrance. Because we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly what's been happening here. As the SEAL team secured their prisoners and began collecting evidence, the woman's voice came over the comm one final time. Team 7, you need to move fast. I'm detecting additional forces converging on your position. The people behind this operation aren't going to let you walk out of here with proof of their crimes. Morrison looked at the briefcases full of classified documents, at the laptop computers containing evidence of treason at the highest levels, at the prisoners who could testify to corruption that reached into the heart of the American military establishment. Then we'd better make sure we're worth more alive than dead, he replied. The battle for truth was just beginning. The helicopter appeared on Admiral Pierce's radar screen like a harbinger of judgment. Fast, military, and heading directly for the USS Hampton with the kind of determination that suggested its occupants weren't planning a social visit. Sir, incoming aircraft is broadcasting Pentagon identification codes, his communications officer reported. They're requesting immediate landing clearance and citing executive authority. Pierce studied the radar signature through his binoculars and felt his blood run cold. This wasn't a transport helicopter or a reconnaissance aircraft. This was a gunship, armed with weapons that could turn his vessel into scrap metal in minutes. Deny landing clearance, he ordered. Tell him our flight deck is unavailable due to ongoing combat operations. Sir, they're not requesting permission anymore. They're declaring emergency authority and coming in whether we approve or not. As the helicopter descended toward his ship, Pierce realized he was facing the moment every military commander dreads, the point where duty to country and duty to conscience become irreconcilable opposites. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd believed in, everything he'd sworn to protect was about to be put to the ultimate test. Meanwhile, 30 miles away, SEAL Team 7 was learning just how far their enemies were willing to go to protect their secrets. The compound that had been relatively quiet during their infiltration was now swarming with armed personnel, not the local militia they'd expected, but professional soldiers with American equipment and American training. Command, we've got serious problems, Morrison reported as his team prepared to exfiltrate with their prisoners. Multiple hostiles converging on our position. These aren't local forces. Someone called in a full tactical response. The woman's voice came back immediately, but for the first time since the operation began, she sounded genuinely concerned. How many? At least 30, possibly more. Full combat gear, coordinated movement patterns, night vision equipment. Whoever wants these prisoners back has serious resources. Then we changed the game, she replied. New extraction point. I'm sending coordinates now. The coordinates she transmitted led to a section of coastline that looked impossible to reach. A narrow beach surrounded by cliffs and exposed to fire from multiple directions. But Chief Webb recognized the tactical thinking behind the choice. It's a bottleneck, he realized. They can only approach from one direction, which means we can control the engagement. More than that, the woman's voice explained. It's a place where the cavalry can actually reach us. Before anyone could. Ask what she meant. The sound of rotors echoed across the water. But instead of enemy helicopters, what appeared on the horizon was a sight that made every SEAL's heart leap with hope. 2 U.S. Marine Corps transport helicopters, flying low and fast toward their position. How did you? Morrison began. Some people in this government still believe in the Constitution, she replied. The real question is whether they'll get here before the fake ones do. On the USS Hampton, Admiral Pierce was facing his own version of the same crisis. The helicopter had landed on his flight deck despite his refusal to grant permission, and armed personnel were now deploying across his ship. But these weren't legitimate military personnel conducting a lawful boarding. They were operatives, with questionable authority trying to silence witnesses to criminal activity. Admiral Pierce, the team leader, announced as he entered the bridge. I'm Colonel Matthews, Defense Intelligence Agency. You and your crew are under immediate detention for questioning related to security violations. Pierce looked at the man's credentials, which appeared authentic, then at his equipment, which was definitely military grade, then at his eyes, which held the cold calculation of someone who'd been given orders that didn't appear in any official manual. I'm afraid I can't comply with that request, Colonel, Pierce replied calmly. My crew and I are conducting lawful military operations under proper authority. Your authority has been revoked, Matthews replied. This ship is now under DIA control pending investigation of security breaches and possible treason charges. The word treason hung in the air like poison gas. Pierce understood the implications. Once that charge was formally made, even if it was eventually disproven, his career would be over and his crew would be scattered to assignments where they could never again serve together. Colonel, before you proceed with whatever orders you've been given, I think you should know that everything happening on this ship tonight has been recorded and transmitted to multiple secure locations, Pierce said quietly. If anything happens to me or my crew, if we disappear or suffer unfortunate accidents, the evidence will be released to every major news organization in the country. Matthew's expression didn't change, but Pierce could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. The colonel was trying to determine whether Pierce was bluffing, whether the evidence actually existed, and whether his orders covered the possibility of widespread exposure. You're making a serious mistake, Admiral, Matthews said finally. The people behind this operation have resources you can't imagine and reach you can't comprehend. Standing against them won't make you a hero. It'll make you a casualty. Maybe, Pierce replied. But it'll make me a casualty who went down fighting for what's right instead of what's convenient. Back at the compound, SEAL Team 7 was discovering that their extraction was going to be anything but routine. The Marine helicopters had arrived as promised, but so had enemy forces with surface-to-air missiles. The narrow beach that was supposed to be their salvation had become a three-way battleground between SEALs trying to escape. Marines trying to rescue them, and rogue operatives trying to silence them all. "This is getting ridiculous," Chief Webb muttered as he returned fire at positions that definitely hadn't been in the original intelligence briefing. "It's about to get worse," Morrison replied, watching enemy reinforcements arrive by land and sea. "We're outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of ammunition." But the woman had one more card to play. "Team 7, I need you to trust me one more time," her voice came over the comm. "Take your prisoners and move to the highest point on the beach. When I give the signal, everyone get as low as possible and stay down until I tell you to move." "What kind of signal?" Morrison asked. "You'll know it when you see it." 30 seconds later, they knew. The night sky lit up with the trails of guided missiles launched from positions no one had detected. But these weren't enemy missiles targeting the rescue helicopters. They were precision strikes taking out every hostile position around the beach with surgical accuracy. "Now that," Webb said with profound admiration, "is how you call in fire support." As the last of the enemy positions went silent, the woman's voice came over the comm one final time, but now it carried a tone of finality that hadn't been there before. "Team 7, this is where we part ways. Your extraction is secure. Your prisoners are valuable, and your evidence will be enough to start bringing down the people responsible for tonight's disasters." "What about you?" Morrison asked. "I've got other battles to fight," she replied. "But thank you for trusting a ghost when it mattered." The transmission ended, and despite repeated attempts to re-establish contact, the woman who had saved their lives and their mission had vanished back into the shadows where legends are born. As the Marine helicopters lifted off with SEAL Team 7 and their prisoners, Admiral Pierce was winning his own battle aboard the USS Hampton. The evidence he'd threatened to release was very real, and Colonel Matthews had apparently received new orders that involved a tactical withdrawal rather than a frontal assault on the truth. But Pierce knew this was just the beginning. The people behind tonight's operation had been exposed, but they hadn't been defeated. The evidence would have to be presented, testified to, and defended against. Counterattacks from forces with unlimited resources and questionable morals. The war for the soul of the American military had just begun. 6 months later, Admiral Pierce sat in a secure conference room in the Pentagon, surrounded by documents that would have been unthinkable before that night on the USS Hampton. Transcripts of congressional hearings, indictments against senior military officials, classified reports detailing the extent of the corruption that had been uncovered by a single evening's operation. The prisoners SEAL Team 7 had captured had indeed proven valuable. Under interrogation, they'd revealed a network of illegal arms sales, intelligence trafficking, and strategic manipulation that reached into the highest levels of government. 3 generals had been court-martialed. 2 defense contractors had lost their security clearances permanently. 1 former secretary of defense was facing federal charges that could put him away for the rest of his life. Commander Morrison entered the conference room carrying a file that Pierce had been waiting months to see. "Final report on Operation Nightfall," Morrison announced, setting the thick folder on the table. "Complete operational analysis, personnel, evaluations, and recommendations for future tactical doctrine." Pierce opened the file and began reading. The mission had been a complete success by every measurable standard. The target had been captured, valuable intelligence had been gathered, no American lives had been lost, and a significant criminal conspiracy had been exposed. Any military officer would have been proud to have such an operation on their record. But there was one section of the report that Pierce found particularly interesting: the personnel evaluations. "I notice you've listed 8 team members for this operation," he said to Morrison, "but your official roster only shows 7 SEALs." Morrison's expression was carefully neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir." "I mean the 8th person. The one who provided tactical guidance, intelligence support, and fire coordination. The one who made the difference between success and disaster. Sir, all personnel involved in Operation Nightfall have been accounted for in the official record. Pierce closed the file and looked at Morrison directly. Jake, we've known each other for 10 years. We've served together through some of the military's most challenging operations. I'm not asking for official records or regulated procedures. I'm asking you, personally, what happened to her? Morrison was quiet for a long moment, weighing his response. Admiral, some people serve their country by wearing uniforms and following orders. Others serve by existing in the spaces between the rules, doing the jobs that can't be officially acknowledged, fighting battles that never make it into the history books. And which category does she fall into? The category of people who make it possible for the rest of us to sleep peacefully at night, knowing that someone is watching over us who doesn't need recognition or glory or official acknowledgement to do the right thing. Pierce nodded slowly. He'd suspected as much, but it was good to have confirmation. Have you had any contact with her since the operation? Morrison smiled slightly. Sir, I've had contact with her during 17 different operations over the past 5 years. Sometimes I knew she was there. Sometimes I didn't find out until after the mission was complete. But she was always there when we needed her. And you have no idea who she really is. I know everything about her that matters, Morrison replied. She's someone who keeps her word, someone who values American lives over political convenience, and someone who's willing to risk everything to make sure good people come home safely. 3 days later, Pierce received a message through channels so secure that most people didn't know they existed. It was brief, unsigned, and contained information that only one person could have provided. The network has been disrupted but not destroyed. 3 major cells remain active. Recommend continued vigilance. Operations scheduled for next month in Syria and Kazakhstan may be compromised. Trust no one with clearance above your level until further notice. The truth is a way of surfacing when good people refuse to stay silent. Pierce read the message twice, then deleted it according to the security protocols he'd learned during his months of congressional testimony. But he kept the important information, the knowledge that somewhere in the shadows, someone was still fighting to protect American interests against American enemies. Chief Webb found him an hour later, standing on the observation deck of the Pentagon, looking out over the Potomac River. Sir, I thought you should know. We just received word that the Kazakhstan operation has been canceled. CENTCOM cited intelligence concerns and potential security breaches. Pierce nodded without surprise. Any official explanation? There. Saying routine security review revealed procedural irregularities. Nothing that points to any specific source of information. Of course not. Webb joined him at the railing, both men watching the river flow past a seat of American military power. Do you think we'll ever see her again? Webb asked. I think we see her every time one of our operations succeeds against impossible odds, Pierce replied. Every time intelligence proves accurate when it should have been compromised. Every time American personnel come home safely from missions that should have been disasters. You really think she's still out there? Pierce smiled, remembering the respect in the eyes of battle-hardened SEALs, the precision of tactical guidance that saved lives, the quiet determination of someone who fought for principles rather than politics. Chief, some people become legends because of what they accomplish. Others become legends because of what they represent. She represents the idea that there are still people willing to do the right thing even when no one will ever know they did it. As the sun set over Washington, casting long shadows across the river, Admiral Pierce realized that the most important lesson from Operation Nightfall wasn't about tactics or intelligence or military procedure. It was about the fact that in a world of competing interests and political calculations, There were still people who measured success by a simple standard: bringing good people home alive. The woman who had saved SEAL Team 7 had vanished back into the shadows where she'd always belonged. But her legend lived on in every successful mission, every life saved, every operation that succeeded because someone, somewhere, was watching over American forces with the dedication of a guardian angel and the skills of a master warrior. Admiral Pierce never learned her name, but he never forgot what she taught him: that sometimes the most important battles are fought by people the history books will never mention, and that the greatest heroes are often the ones whose heroism can never be officially acknowledged. In the end, that was enough. Because legends don't need names to be remembered, and heroes don't need recognition to know they've made a difference. They just need to know that somewhere, someone is sleeping safely because of what they did in the darkness. And that knowledge is worth more than any medal, any promotion, or any place in the official record. It's worth everything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.